Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Film Haven Reviews. I'm your host Sawyer as always, and today we are going to be continuing our middle-aged Godzilla theme with the 1989 film Godzilla vs. Biollante. Finally got to say it right. I was just reading it, I'm like, I don't know, but it makes sense. It's from some French poem from the 1800s, so it makes sense. Biollante, if you think about it that way. So there's actually not too much to talk about with this movie, just because it's kind of more of the same. We can compare it, of course, to the last week's film, Godzilla, The Return of Godzilla, which was this movie's direct, predecessor. This was a direct sequel, like to the point where they literally show you like the ending of Return of Godzilla at the beginning of this film. So I did like that it was just going right into it. And what I was most kind of intrigued by was this Biollante, the bad guy in this. And it seems like this was like kind of a cool movie, and the poster is sick, which I will obviously probably already overlaid. But if you are listening to this on audio, go look up the poster for this movie, Godzilla vs. Biollante. It's from 1989. Oh man, I mean, that's sometimes it's just all it takes is the poster and I'm down, and that was definitely the case with this movie. So it's a cool poster, and the bad guy, the other monster, is kind of this like mirror image of Godzilla, but it's like a plant version of Godzilla, which is it's a really cool idea. We'll get into whether it worked or not in a little bit, but for me, I still love the concept of this monster and would love to see it in some of these newer Godzilla movies that have been coming out. We've had some good ones as of late. Well, New Empire, Godzilla and Kong New Empire was not the best movie, but the franchise itself is doing very well, and I have liked a lot of them, like King of Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong. I think both of those are pretty fun. King of Monsters might be my favorite Godzilla movie, besides maybe Godzilla -1. As far as like standalone Godzilla movies, like where it's just Godzilla and humans, I'm gonna definitely go with Godzilla -1, and it is technically a better movie. But as far as just fun Godzilla action fighting other monsters, Godzilla King of Monsters is really well done. And a lot of people complain about the story, and I'm like, how many Godzilla movies have you seen? Because if you're complaining about the story too much, then you obviously have not been seeing that many Godzilla movies, because they're usually not good. Speaking of which, this one does not break the mold, and it is I don't know if it's worse or not. I think it kind of evens out. Some of it is worse and some of it is better than the human story of the last film. Speaking of which, let's just get into it. I'll read from IMDb here. I realized that IMDb actually, if you scroll down ever on IMDb, you can actually see a more, it's called storyline instead of just plot, where you can actually have a little bit more of a drawn out kind of explanation of the story. This one's makes a lot more sense than the like one line that is like maybe 10 or 12 words on the IMDb page for the plot. So here we go. According to IMDb, this movie is about a grief-stricken scientist accidentally creates a monstrous hybrid called Biollante through gene splicing experiments while attempting to revive his late daughter. Godzilla soon escapes from his volcanic prison, remember that from last episode, and ends up on a collision course with this mutant creature, which shares his DNA. So like I was saying, this creature is like basically a gene-spliced version of Godzilla. What the scientist does is he takes, this is crazy, but he takes DNA for like cells from his late daughter, his dead daughter. He takes cells from a plant, like a rose, and then he takes cells from Godzilla, and he splices them together, and then this rose plant turns into a monstrosity that is, supposed to be able to go toe and toe with Godzilla. And spoiler alert here, once again, if you want to see this movie, watch it on HBO Max. I'm going to talk pretty freely about it because it's a Godzilla movie. Spoiler alert, Godzilla actually loses technically to Biollante, which is interesting. But the caveat here is with the help of the humans. So, I mean, it wasn't really a fair fight. But yeah, technically Godzilla loses, which sometimes when Godzilla loses, I'm so sketched out by that, because I'm like, I don't know. On paper, I think Godzilla is pretty much the best. Like in Godzilla versus Kong technically wins, I think, the battle before Mechagodzilla comes out. And I'm like, I still don't know if I believe that. Godzilla is just too crazy. You have to write Godzilla to lose. I think, like I said, on paper, Godzilla pretty much wins everything. And I'll tell you what. See, the thing is with this movie and with these movies, this kind of era, Godzilla's slower, of course, right? So, I mean, you look at the Godzillas from the more American franchises of late, he's definitely a lot quicker and more, able to do more things. But in this one, the big thing that Godzilla has is the heat ray, and he uses that atomic ray, and he uses the atomic breath like a lot in this movie, which is, I'm not complaining at all, but you kind of get that feeling of like, if he doesn't have this, what does he have? Because at least in the way that they're filming him, he's not using his hands or his feet to like punch or kick or anything like that. So it's really just the atomic breath. And well, he uses it to great effect here. And the fact that he's just kind of unkillable. Like you can hurt him, stop him. And that's one of the things about this movie. We're kind of, once again, I'm not as prepared as I usually am because I'm kind of scaling things back. But the story is ridiculous, and the plot is ridiculous, and it's evidenced by the fact that the end of the movie just has Godzilla going back into the sea. Like he loses the fight, and it looks like he's been defeated, and then he just like gets up, and everyone's like, oh. The seawater must have cooled his temperature, because the whole human side of the way that they were trying to get rid of him was by injecting this anti-nuclear bacteria on him. But because he has he's like a reptile or something, he has like he's cold-blooded, he has like naturally low body temperature, the bacteria isn't really catching on, and so they had to try to heat him up. Which I'm like, I mean, I think he can withstand some crazy heat too, because he literally was just living in a volcano for like 4 years. So, and he just got out, which, oh my God, we're going to get into that too. But anyway, he's down for the count and everyone thinks he's dead. Biollante magically disperses into the sky, and a visage of the scientist's dead daughter comes up in the kind of powder that's going into the sky, and kind of, basically gives a wink and flies up into the heavens. I don't know. That was also just like what's happening in this film. But yeah, and then Godzilla just gets up and walks away, and everyone that's watching is just like, Godzilla's going back to the sea and Biollante is going into the sky. Everything's, coming up aces. And I'm like, wait, I think the whole point was to destroy Godzilla, right? Because he is a problem. Like this whole movie was like, Godzilla's back. We got to do something about him. And you call him just going away into the ocean of victory. I think that's one of those you won the battle, but not the war situations. But hey, far be it from me to put logic into a plot like this. Anyway, so yeah, right here, I'll just go ahead and stop and say that I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10, I think. Not a 7.5. I definitely prefer Return of Godzilla. I definitely think that there are things in this movie that are better maybe than Godzilla. One of the best things is that the actual suit is better. The kind of suit that the person's in for the Godzilla costume is much better. You just more ominous, and the eyes, they fixed the eyes, thank God. I mean, it's still not amazing, but it's way better. It doesn't look so derpy. The only issue is that the movie is not nearly as dark as the Return of Godzilla. Return of Godzilla really was trying to capture the essence of what the original Godzilla was about, and while there was some parts that were a little silly, for the most part, it had a very serious tone. And this movie just kind of throws that out the window again. And I'm like, it feels like they took a slide back to the 60s and 70s. Not completely. It still contained some of that more serious, more... and when I say serious, I really mean for Godzilla and maybe not the characters themselves. But just it still has a little bit more of a higher stakes and stuff than, Godzilla playing beach volleyball with the boulder with a giant crab, I think, or giant lobster. I think that it is definitely not that far gone, but at the same time, like the very 80s, like late, I guess it's now late 80s soundtrack, just really took away from a lot of the seriousness. There's literally like a kind of a fight scene where a guy hits another guy over the head and it makes like a boing kind of noise, and I'm like face palm, like, no, we don't need this. We don't need like pratfalls and like slapstick in a Godzilla movie. Please stop. That stuff like that is one of the reasons why this is getting a 7 out of 10, is because even with the bad human story, it's, for me, I could even take a bad human story. It's the vibes, I guess, the atmosphere. They really were kind of all over the place with what the tone of this movie is supposed to try to be. And then, of course, there is just some of the logic of the movie. Once again, I'm down for kind of like human characters I don't care too much about. But this movie, they were trying to do too much. And then some of the choices that they did make, some of the character choices that they made, just made so little sense that I'm like, this is the one decision that needs to make sense, because it is like so important. I'll obviously give the example that I am referencing, and that is the scientist who makes Biollante. The reason, like, okay, so hold on. I had to back up a little bit, because while I did read the plot of this movie, or the storyline, one of the issues with it is that there's just too many moving parts. Like with Return of Godzilla, yeah, there's like 4 characters, so that's a lot, but they're all kind of together. And then there's the side stuff with the governments. So you have like government stuff, and then you have human kind of on the ground stuff, and that's fine. Like that seems like slightly convoluted, but not really too bad. Whereas this one, there's like 5 different interest groups, and that unnecessary. I'll say that. So first and foremost, you've got this the scientist who was working for a like copyright safe Saudi Arabia company. Like they won't say the word Saudi Arabia, it's called Sardinia or something. But I'm like, this is obviously like a major Middle Eastern country. What sounds like Saudi Arabia, Sardinia. Okay. So yeah, basically after the events of the first movie, The Return of Godzilla, the one from last week, they take a bit of his skin, of his flesh that was torn off, and at first this like kind of covert American military op tries to steal it, and then this like John Wick assassin, like Saudi Arabian assassin guy who's throughout the movie, he comes in throughout the movie, like assassinates the kind of secret ops Americans, steals the flesh, takes it back to the Sardinia Research Institute or something, which is where this Japanese scientist is working, because they won't let him work on his bioscience in Japan because it's too cutting edge, right? And so he's in the middle of working on that stuff, and something about it, there's an explosion. It's been, once again, it's a little convoluted, but the explosion causes the death of his daughter, the scientist. And so he equates this research into Godzilla as killing his daughter. And so eventually later, we're going to yada, yada, yada through a lot of this. There is... he gets the opportunity to work on Godzilla again, like Godzilla stuff again, because Godzilla's back. The reason why Godzilla's back is because there's this like small American, or at least English speaking, like terrorist group who's trying to steal information on Godzilla, and then they hold the whole country hostage by saying that we're going to blow up the volcano that is currently holding Godzilla. And then the assassin guy, once again, the Sardinia assassin, comes back right when the Americans were kind of being like, JK, we're actually not going to blow it up. We were just trying to scare you. And then he like forces it to blow up, and Godzilla comes out because I guess his company wants more Godzilla stuff so that they can... The whole point of researching the Godzilla flesh was because they want to create anti-nuclear bacteria, or anti-nuclear kind of properties and stuff. And the reason why you'd want to do that is because it's an ultimate nuclear deterrent. It would neutralize nuclear arms if you had some kind of thing that was anti-nuclear. Now, of course, that science makes zero sense, but that's okay. It makes enough sense. There's at least some logic there. The problem is that it's just too many people all at once. And then you've got this like government duo, like a partner system where you've got this guy whose whole job is to try to prep everybody for Godzilla. And he's kind of like a detective of sorts or a cop. He's going after the American terrorists. And then you've also got the assassin who's running around the whole time. And then you got the American terrorists running around. That's just one little section there. Then you got the scientist. Then you have a guy who works, I'm trying to remember all this and put this on my head, a guy who works for the government, or at least works for some institute, or it's a corporation, right? Because there's a corporation who is hiring the scientists to work on the Godzilla stuff for the anti-nuclear stuff. It's not the government, it's a corporation. There's a guy who works for the corporation who is also like at least a girlfriend with this lady who takes care of people with ESP. Yeah, that's right. We're going to psychics. So then there's this little girl who has the ability to communicate psychically and has clairvoyance, and she has dreams where she sees things. And then there's like a scene where everyone's dreaming about Godzilla coming back. Like the lady goes into her class with all these little psychics, and she's like, "Oh, did you draw your dreams today?" And they all throw up a paper and it's all Godzilla's. And it's like, "Oh, okay, we know it's coming." So yeah, so they're I just can't get over this, because it's like on top of all this stuff, you've also got a psychic girl running around. Of course you do. And then there's one more character that we got to talk about, and that is this guy who is basically signed on. He's been trained specifically. He's very young, but he's been trained very specifically to take down Godzilla if he ever comes back. Like, he is in charge of, and this is the best part of the movie, I'm going to say, the Super X2. That's right. Super X from last episode from the Return of Godzilla, which I loved so much, is back, and it's better than ever. The Super X2 is bigger, has more armor, and it has this new special weapon that like opens up its little front hatches, and there's like a big diamond in the middle with all these reflectors around it. And what it basically does, which this is cool. This is one of those things where it's like there are some things that are better than the last movie, or things that they improved upon that I'm like really happy with, and this is one of them. It basically has the ability to reflect the atomic breath back at Godzilla. So, which if you think about it, like once again, conceptually, every movie's got to figure things out from like, how can we take care of Godzilla? What are these things? How can we counter Godzilla? That's a really good idea. I mean, obviously it's sci-fi. There's no way it actually would work, but like to take and reflect the atomic breath back onto him, it effectively neutralizes the attack, and it also creates attack at the same time, which is, I mean, that's really smart. So I loved that. But yeah, so there's this guy who's in charge of that, and he's like this unflappable startup kind of young kid who's also very, very confident in what he's doing. I actually liked his character the most because it actually seemed like there was ironically an adult in the room, someone who knew what they were doing and wasn't just freaking out or making dumb decisions. And so I liked his character, but once again, I'm adding that character onto all these other factions. There's like terrorists, there's a Sardinia assassin, there's a cop duo, there's a girl that's a psychic, there's a scientist, and then there's these other two characters that are basically just running in between all these different factions. So trying to bring it back to that one decision that I think was really dumb. Whenever this corporation have the Godzilla DNA, and they're like, hey, we want you to use this in order to make something that can fight Godzilla, or at least make this no, it's not even that. It's just to make this anti-nuclear stuff. And he says, oh no, I won't do it. And then he thinks, I've got to do it, or Godzilla is going to kill everyone, basically. And okay. And so in secret, he does something different than what he tells the corporation he's going to do. So the corporation thinks that he's going to be working on this anti-nuclear stuff. And in reality, he is gene splicing his dead daughter, into a Rose and Godzilla, which is highly unethical. I'm just like, what did you think was going to happen? The logic didn't make any sense for like why he decided to do that. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, like in the post-op here, I'm like, okay, I guess he just wanted his daughter back. I didn't really put that together until the end, but like he's trying to revive his daughter. which I guess makes sense. But the story just doesn't. They could have done it so much better. Like, I think that the idea of a biochemist or a gene splicer guy who, out of grief, creates a monster to try to revive his daughter, I think that's very compelling. I think it's very, obviously it's like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's got a lot of kind of vibes of that, trying to create life or just bring back life, or maybe a little bit of Reanimator, that kind of stuff. But the way that they did it in this, the whole time I was just like, this is silly and dumb. It's not helping that there's this 80s soundtrack that's just really bad compared to the very good soundtrack that was only made in 4 days from the last movie. Just not hidden. The things, though, that are keeping this at a 7, well, of course, we got the SpaceX 2. That helps. We also have, when the Godzilla action actually ends up happening, it is pretty good. There's a scene where he takes on this city of Osaka, and that is cool. It looks cool. Cool fight with the Super X. There's a cool fight with the Super X2 in the water. That was pretty cool. And then when Biollante too has cool design. I think there for a while Biollante just like turns into this kind of like rose spire in the middle of the ocean in the bay, and everyone's just kind of gawking at it. And then kind of similar to in the newer Godzilla movies, where Godzilla kind of has this complex where it needs to be the apex, like all these giant monsters around the world, it's got to be the top one. It's kind of, it feels the vibe that there's another one like it out there. And so Godzilla comes and they have their first encounter with Biollante. And so that was a cool fight. Especially where it shows like that Biollante has this like acid breath kind of stuff. It can kind of spit acid at Godzilla, and doesn't seem like he likes it very much. That was pretty cool. But once again, I really feel like it could have been a little bit better. I think one of the issues with the Biollante, especially that fight, is that it's a static thing. So all Godzilla literally had to do was just shoot its atomic breath into its stomach, and that was it. That's all she wrote. So not too dissimilar in the second fight, except for it actually has some movement. It has some legs. It has a mouth that looks like a crazy Venus flytrap version of Godzilla, which is cool. I loved that reveal. And that scene was a little darker. I know I'm a little all over the place here, but I think one of the issues is while it does there is a lot of Godzilla action in this movie, and the action itself is pretty good. I'd say it's better than some I've seen. My issue with it is that, and the reason why I think that I liked Return of Godzilla more, is that I loved that the second half was all like hour by hour. It was basically all in one night kind of thing. Whereas this one jumped around a little bit more and had some sillier parts. The human stuff was too convoluted. Like it wasn't very cohesive. It lacked vision, if that makes sense. It was a little crazier at times, and because of that, some people might say, kind of like what we do with these Lucia Fulci films, where it's like, well, it's at least kind of fun to watch, but I found myself maybe even a little bit more bored with this film than I was Return of Godzilla, just because the second half of Return of Godzilla is so much better as far as like the actual story goes. Like it was more compelling. Godzilla felt like a force of nature, felt like this disastrous entity that like every minute that you leave him in the city is every minute more people are dying. So you got to do something about it. Like that is a naturally compelling kind of scenario to be in, whereas in this movie it was just a little looser, where it was just like, oh, and now Biollante's here, and the scientist has this like affinity for Biollante. Now I understand it's because of his daughter, but still, like, it just didn't make a lot of sense. Like everyone's like, and then he says the Godzilla and Biollante, there's not the problem. They're not the bad guys. The humans are the bad guys because we created them. And it's like, no, you created Biollante. You know that, right? Like you're the creator of this crazy like abomination of your daughter Rose and Godzilla. I just can't get over too that why Biollante, after defeating Godzilla, just decides to just like turn into a gaseous form with all these little particles, show a visage of his daughter, and then just absorb into the sky. I just as you could tell, it didn't really make a lot of sense. It's not as cohesive as the last movie, but it does have a lot of individual parts that are really good. The suit is better. I think overall the budget was better. The action was a little bit better in parts. So like, it's like they're going in the right direction on the visual effects department. Maybe there's even a CGI scene, which is crazy for 1989. I mean, it's not like, it's not quite, what was the other 1989 movie? The Abyss. It's not quite James Cameron's The Abyss CGI. It's literally like computer graphics. Like they're doing like a AutoCAD kind of graphical breakdown of how they're going to raise Godzilla's temperature using all these lightning pads and stuff. And they're showing it in the computer, but it is CGI technically, which is cool. And I think it is the first movie to ever do that. Yeah, it was, I think at the time I read that it was the most expensive Godzilla or even live action Japanese film to date, which was only $10.7 million, which today is a low budget film, unfortunately. But at the time it was a super big budget. And actually there was a poll done back in 2014 when the new American Godzilla was coming out, of what Godzilla fans like favorite Godzilla movie was, and this was the winner, the number one. And as we see on IMDb, it's got a 6.5, which is 3 points or 0.3 lower than Return of Godzilla. So I'm a little confused by that, but once again, it's 3 points. It's just weird that I definitely wouldn't agree. This is not my favorite Godzilla I've ever seen. I talked about that at the beginning. I definitely would say that Return of Godzilla is up there for the ones that I've seen. I think that was a really solid film, 7.5. Shin Godzilla was good. I think I gave that a 7.5 too. It had some really good moments and then it had some boring parts. But I don't think this movie should be the number one, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. Now, I will say it's number one for Best Poster. Best poster of all the Godzilla franchise. But I don't know. Other than that, I pretty much think I exhausted everything I need to say. 7 out of 10. I think I'm being a little generous on that, but there was lots of individual parts that I liked. And there is a little bit of that Fulci so good it's bad in there, especially with the effigy of the daughter in the sky giving a little wink before she goes away. And just the gall of them having so many different characters, even though it was a bad thing. At the end of the day, I'm like, I'll never forget how absolutely convoluted this film was. And having this little psychic girl who apparently, I wish I wouldn't have read this because I would have been finding this out next episode too. Apparently she was such a fan favorite. This little psychic girl was such a fan favorite that the director or the showrunner basically basically because it was so popular, they were like, oh, let's shoehorn her into every story now. And so for the rest of these Heisei or Heisei, I don't know how to pronounce it, Godzilla films, she's a main character, not a main character, or at least a character in all of these films. Not all of them, but most of them. And so she's actually the highest or the most prolific returning character in the entire Godzilla franchise. So this is her first film, but she is going to be in at least 3 or 4 more, which is crazy. Speaking of which, next week we are going to be doing Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, which is really cool. I'm very excited for that. Talk about a good poster, though. Biollante's poster is unique, but this poster is just like, oh man, that's about as good as Godzilla poster can get. Like where he's all wrapped up in the Ghidorah's heads and shooting the fire and everything. Oh man, that's a great poster. Definitely look that one up too. We'll be talking about it next week. So I hope you guys have a great week this week, and I will see you next Friday.